Hello? Hello, can we hear each other?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Hi, Ajay, can you hear me? Hi, Ohuna,
Hi, ma'am.
just check your audio. Shine. Hi.
Yes. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, you are. Can you hear me? Yes. Ishita.
Okay.
Anushka, say
Yes,
something.
ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Ajinkya.
I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are. Mr. Jakhar, you can meet all our reporters who had gone on ground report to various places.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes.
So that's very good. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So we are waiting for 2 o'clock, and Mr. Ashok Sehgal will join from CII MSME Council. Is my screen okay, or shall I tilt it a bit? It's okay.
आते ही बता देना मेरे दिल हुआ वो कार प्रिंट आउट दो फोन भी दे दो मेरा
Hello, Mr. Sehgal.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good
Good
afternoon. Good afternoon. So we have with us Mr. Jakar and Mr. Jakar. Mr. Sehgal is here from CII, and we have our colleagues from Business Standard who had gone on ground reporting to various places to find out the impact of the war. So they are all here, and we'll be starting in a bit.
Great. Yeah. All right. I thought Mr. Mukundan is supposed to join also from CIA or no?
No, only
No.
you are. No.
Okay. All right. So I'm there on behalf of CIA. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Hello, everyone. Hello and welcome to the Business Standard Dialogue. This is a new webinar initiative from Business Standard. And on this platform, we'll be discussing current issues related to economy, business, companies, corporate affairs, geopolitics, and much, much more. So today, the topic is something that we are all interested in. We are talking about it all the time. That's the war, US-Iran war. And I'm Nivedita Mukherjee. I'm your host. I'm from Business Standard, and I have with me my colleagues from various bureaus of Business Standard, and they had gone on ground reporting to see for themselves how the war is going to have an impact on economy, agriculture, and all aspects of life and livelihood. We'll start with our in-house panelists. That's Ajinkya Kawale. He's from Mumbai Bureau. Ajinkya, why don't you say where you had visited?
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon. I visited parts of Pune, the MIDC, wherein there are a lot of MSMEs, especially in the auto ancillary, auto components sector. And there, I think the core concern was about the labor exodus, because even a hint of disruption revives pandemic memories of the lockdown. And the primary concern was if 25-40% of the workforce leaves, uh, that would create the most impact even before the operators factor in any supply chain challenges. So the labor impact was at the top of their minds.
Right. Thanks, Ajinkya. We'll come back to you in a bit. Ishita Ayan Dutt, she's from Kolkata Bureau. Ishita, you had gone to Howrah Foundries. What were the takeaways from there?
So Howrah is actually home to about 95% of West Bengal's foundry and forging units. And the impact of the war is playing out in different ways and in varying degrees. So exports to West Asia are hit, shipping costs have increased, raw material prices have increased, and gas shortage is disrupting supply chains. And at the end of it all is other workers. Their working hours have reduced and overtime has become a casualty.
Right. We go over to Ohana Mukherjee now. Ohana is from the New Delhi Bureau. She covers labor as a beat. Ohana, you went to Firozabad in Uttar Pradesh. That's glass factories mainly, right?
Yeah, so in Firozabad, the economy is largely built by these factories that produce glass, which requires a lot of fuel to keep the furnaces running. So there was impacts on production and ultimately on livelihoods of contract workers there. So that is what I noticed, which I'll be happy to talk more about later on.
Okay, Ohana, we'll come back to you. Shine Jacob, he's from the Chennai Bureau, and he had also gone to Ambattur, where, Shine.
So I have visited Ambattur. Here also the story is almost the same. It's like other clusters. The LPG crisis is a major, then raw material shortage For example, and other items like nickel, copper facing a huge shortage. And at the same time, labor is another major issue because LP prices percent of to North Indian states. They are ready to pay back. As one major issue, Abdur, we'll like to talk more about in detail in next, because it's very crucial for India because China is to 30% of India and 35% out of India as well. That way,
Right.
Abdur is very crucial for increase overall auto system.
Right, Shine. We'll come back to you. Anushka Bhardwaj, also from New Delhi Bureau. Anushka had gone to Haryana and Punjab mandis. She was tracking the fertilizer shortage and how it's going to impact agriculture. Anushka?
Yes, ma'am. So basically, what happened in mandis are that the saving grace is that this is not the peak peak demand season right now. So the wholesalers, retailers, they do have the stock, but then there is also a lot of bulk buying, panic buying happening from the end of the farmers because they can see that the supply is disrupted. They see that the trucks, the racks of urea, DAP have not arrived since last 3 months, 2 months. So there is a chance that the shortage comes up in the month of June, July when we reach the peak demand season. Yeah.
Right. I meet our special panelist today, Mr. Ajay Veer Jakar. Can we have you on the video, please? Yes, Mr. Ajay Veer Jakar, he's the chairman of Bharat Krishak Samaj or Indian Farmers Forum. Welcome to the show, Mr. Jakar. You heard what Anushka said, after her ground report, what she found out about the fertilizer shortage in the mandis. So what is your take really? How is it going to pan out?
Thank you, Nivedita. Thank you, Business Standard, for this opportunity. I think India's sowing season is timed with the monsoons and it starts in 2 to 3 months. I believe the Indian bureaucracy is very good at managing crisis. In fact, that's its only strength, managing crisis. India will not face a crisis of fertilizer shortage. I think a 10 to 15% shortage is bureaucratically manageable, I think. Also, a little less application of fertilizer reduce farmer yields. Soil retains the nutrients and nitrogen, phosphates from past applications. And more specifically, that farmers have been overusing them because of India's subsidy regime in the past. So I do not, presuming even if the war continues, which seems unlikely today, I think the country is not going to face a food production or a food security crisis this year. We have buffer stocks and we also expect a very good wheat harvest, which has already started in many places. In the central India, it's still to come to gather force in Punjab. But this is how it stands. If the war was to continue and escalate, then we will face a crisis in the next sowing season. This is how I take it. And additionally, if you see globally, about half of the increase in fertilizer prices becomes an increase in food prices only 12 months later. It does not translate into an increase in price immediately. So that's how I would take this situation. I don't think so there's much to worry about as far as India's food security is concerned, as far as food security is concerned.
Thanks, Mr. Jakar. That's heartening to hear that India is good at crisis management, and
In
there's
fact,
nothing.
that's the only thing it's good at.
All right, we'll come back to you. Our next panelist, Mr. Ashok Saigal, he's co-chairman CII National MSME Council. Mr. Saigal, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming. What is your take on how MSME businesses are going to be impacted by this war? You heard our reporters who had gone out to various places.
Well, I thank you for having me join your panel, and I think it's encouraging to hear Mr. Jharkar say that he feels the bureaucracy is competent and is dealing with the situation well. We tend to always feel that the bureaucracy is inefficient. I am not sure.
Ashok, Secretary, I want to, interject and say I never said the bureaucracy is competent. I said it's competent at crisis management only. So there's a big difference between the two, but please continue.
Anyway, that's a silver lining. They are something they're good at, and I think I would echo that to a large degree, particularly the interactions we're seeing with the people at the top levels in Delhi certainly are very good at it. I'm sure, and I'm aware that the status in each of the states is not equally good, but I think the directions coming from on top gives me the same confidence that Mr. Jakar has, that we will manage this crisis in a reasonable manner. There will be sectoral hits, and we have to be sensitive to that. I must agree also with some of the field visits made by your staff. For example, the auto components. It was mentioned by who'd gone there. Anyway,
I think Ajinkya had gone to
yeah,
the Pune units, and Shine had gone to
right. So I think
Ambattur. Yeah.
Ajinkya mentioned, he mentioned the exodus of workers being one of the
Yes.
factors. And that is, again, not necessarily related to the oil crisis and the war in the East, in the Middle East. According to what we have seen in recent times in Gurgaon, is that another reason for that exodus of workers is the elections upcoming in West Bengal, where particularly amongst the Bengali workers, both in industry and in the domestic sector, people have gone back to cast their votes. So that is one thing which is affecting it. But in the auto sector, what we've been hearing, because the auto component sector is one of the largest groups of MSMEs within our CII MSME organization. So they have a bunch of problems. And one of the very simple and unexpected things is that they say that when they make the components, a lot of them are made from metal, which has to be painted. Now, the paint requires solvents, and they don't have stocks of solvent coming in. So the paint shops shut down, their production shuts down, and they cannot supply further. So now that was an unexpected kind of thing, because one never realized that auto components, which a lot of them are metallic, would be hurt by something so simple. But that is a constraint. And about 2 weeks ago, we had our members tell us that in most cases, they could hold out for maybe a week or 2 weeks, but that was about it. And they hoped that things would improve by then. So another side of the auto components is based on plastics. Now, plastics are everywhere, particularly in all the wiring, the interiors of the automotives, and the whole thing. They go into so many things. Now, polymer prices have shot up by anywhere from 40% upwards during the last 1 month. And at the same time, the report is that nobody is able to commit what will be the price going forward or what will be the availability going forward. So both sides, there is too much uncertainty. And I think when we talk of oil and gas and fuel, we underestimate the impact on things like fertilizer, on solvents, and on things like plastics. Now, plastics go into each and everything, including packaging of many things which are non-engineering and everyday use. So I think that is a major challenge which is building up and will have a major cost impact. And I feel in the very near future, we'll begin to actually have an availability shortage, which will in turn affect the availability of the components and products made from the polymers going forward.
So,
Also, it was
Mr.
mentioned by-
Sehgal, what you are saying suggests that things could be not so sunny. It is quite a gloomy scenario that you are
Oh, that's right. For the polymer-based industries, I think the crisis is building up. For the auto component industry, to some extent, it has already manifested itself.
So, CII had also made a presentation to the government and was asking for a few things from the government. Have you heard back from the government? Is anything happening? Is there any package coming?
Well, I think in terms of package, two things. One is, of course, the financial sustaining through this crisis, much like it happened in COVID times. And what we have been urging the government is that we should take the relevant pages out of our COVID playbook and see which of them apply to the present crisis and to which of the sectors. That was a broad-based thing. Each and every part of the industry was affected. Now we have specific sectors which are being affected. So that is being looked at, and things like the proposal to have like during COVID, there was an emergency credit-linked subsidy, credit-linked system that the working capital was increased for the affected units. So that is one similar suggestion we have made, and it is being well received. Another thing is the question of where to get the materials from, and in that we have also pointed out to the government, well, the government has pointed out to us that the National Small Industries Corporation actually has a window through which they are trying to aggregate the demand and get in the raw materials and make it available to MSMEs. Now, this, some of you may remember that in the old days, there used to be something called the MMTC and the state
Right.
trading corporations and so on, which had enough bargaining power to go out and get some of these materials and make them available. And so we suggested to the government that this can be built up as buffer stocks for industrial materials also, raw materials also. Been well received, and we were told that, in which we have disseminated to our members, that the NSIC has a cell which is looking into this, and that we should send in our requirements to them so they can aggregate it and try and make arrangements for getting it. There are sources other than the Middle East, like for oil, we are looking at places other than the Middle East. So we should look at polymers, and we should look at solvents, and we can look at chemicals coming from other places.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
Right. We'll come back to you, Mr. Jakar. Mr. Sehgal was mentioning COVID times, COVID is being referred to quite a lot. Even when our reporters went out, people were talking about how it's similar to COVID times. So, do you think in agriculture also that same buzz is? Are you hearing the same buzz that it's like COVID time, and do we actually require solutions that came at that time?
I absolutely disagree with what your reporters are saying.
Mhm.
Of course, they have a different everybody has their own personal perspective in what they hear. I was in Achipur in West Bengal like 2 weeks ago. It's a village in West Bengal on the Hooghly, and I found no panic in the people. Um, Even now, I see that there seems to be no, I mean, there's nothing like the COVID times. I mean, I can't even relate it even 1% to that. But of course, the problem is that farmers have started to now fear that fertilizer may go in shortfall. There is no shortfall in the market today, but farmers have started to hoard now fertilizer for the whole season. See, normally, Nivedita, what happens is farmer only buys his basal dose, and then when it's more is required, he buys more, because after all of it is on credit. So he does not buy his whole stock immediately. But if this fear psychosis sets in that there's going to be a shortfall, there is going to be a problem later on. So every farmer, including myself, will say that why will I risk it? If it's available today, let me buy my whole year, whole season stock. And that creates an artificial shortage, and that leads to problems. You will have noticed that even in years, maybe last year, last year, in many of the last few years, there have been lathi charges for fertilizer distribution. There have been instances where you've seen photographs on social media where fertilizer is being distributed from police stations, and all these things have happened in the season, even when there has been no crisis. So we do face a crisis now, and I think it is manageable, and the government needs to be smart about managing it. The other fear farmers have today is of monsoons. And I think farmers fear the lack of monsoons much more than they fear the non-availability of fertilizers. And that is the fear that we have. But we can talk on that later.
Right, right. I'll bring in Anushka here. Anushka had gone to the mandis. Anushka, do you have a question for Mr. Jakar? Is
Um,
there a fear there among farmers?
so the thing that you are saying that there is hoarding happening and farmers are bulk buying, there is no shortage currently. That is absolutely right. They have the stocks, but they also are saying, the retailers and the wholesalers, that there is some disruption in the supply. So they have not, for example, the villager in some villages, the trucks have, they have not arrived. So how do you convince the farmers that don't hoard? Because then they are saying that the crop gives you very little time. It will not wait. It will, it will get spoiled. So how do you convince the farmer that there is no shortage? How can we go about it? We understand, but I think they are still, and also because they can see the disruption happening in other commodities and other resources. They can see what is happening with the gas. They can see what is happening with the other things. So at that point, how do we convince them?
That's a good question, and my answer is that you can't convince farmers, unfortunately. And the problem is not of this particular crisis. First of all, when these shortages come, the opposition is going to magnify these problems and create a bigger fear psychosis. And that's how Indian polity has turned out. It's not about this opposition or this government, but that's how Indian politics has turned out. They don't get together when the country faces a crisis. But the bigger thing is that the government has lost the trust of the farmers, and the farmers will not trust it. And I'll give you an example. In the 1960s, when Lal Bahadur Shastri ji was there, and he gave this call in this ship to mouth times where we faced a huge problem, that everyone should skip a meal, one meal a week, and people responded to it. But that was a different country. That country does not exist today. Today's people have been bred on freebies and have been corrupted by political parties by giving them promises on election and election. So I don't think so. Farmers are going to listen to the government. And that's why maybe the government is not saying there's a problem. But that's how it should be. If you look at what happened with the Ukraine war, let's take the example of Germany. In Germany, the government went and told the people that there is a shortage, and we got to be careful, and we got to use the fuel and very sparsely. So after the Russian energy shock, German households and industry used 17 and 26% less gas respectively. In the sense that production did not fall, but they made an effort to save. Now, this means that telling voters that energy is scarce, they will adapt. That's my theory also. But the government is scared that the government will not listen to them. So this is a problem, and I still think there is a way to manage it other than just convincing farmers. For example, that the margin of error is very less. The monsoon is delayed, right? If the monsoon is delayed, then the requirement of fertilizers in those places will be delayed. The government of India, I think so, has a standard operating procedure कि कौन से state में कितना fertilizer allocate करना है, how much needs to be allocated to a particular state. Now, the trick is in the timing of release of this allocation. So in the sense, let's say if Vidarbha has a shortage, no rainfall in Vidarbha, so you can send the fertilizer a little later there. So I think so it's now a question of how you time allocations of fertilizers, how you make sure that there's no politics and allocation of fertilizers. Center allocates fertilizers to states. They may take a tendency to allocate it to their own states, or their own states where they're in power. And even within a state, for example, let's say Punjab or Haryana, even within a state, when the fertilizer becomes less, then the politically powerful party in the state which is ruling will try and send fertilizers to their stronghold, so their own farmers, ministers area get fertilizers, and other farmers, like where I live, we always get shortchanged. It's been happening over the last 2 years. So I think this is how you actually can manage the crisis. Ashunka, this data about mismanagement of delivery of fertilizers due to vested interests does not show in statistics, because it's not about the delivery. Delivery to utna hi hoega. Delivery will not change, but the timing of the delivery changes, and that's what creates the shortfall. Even if you deliver it 2 weeks later, it creates a shortfall. So I think so that's where the trick is, that the government should be telling farmers that there's a problem, let's help out. It is not going to do it, unfortunately. But what it can do is it can make sure that there's no error in distribution, in timing it, and not to take a standard operating procedure as they've been doing for the last 20 years.
Hope the government is listening to you, and hope farmers are also listening to you, and they listen to each other.
If Nivedita, farmers listen to me, there will be lines at fertilizer outlets right now, which is not true today. Some newspapers have reported their lines, but I think so there is no crisis as of today.
Okay. All right. So we'll have some questions for Mr. Saigal now. Ladies first, Ishita. You have any question for Mr. Saigal from your takeaways from your ground report? Do you want to ask him anything regarding MSMEs?
Sure. Mr. Sehgal, I visited the foundry and forging units in Howrah, and many of them have not modernized. These are MSMEs. So, I was just wondering whether uh, technology upgradation becomes imperative, and will it help them withstand such shocks? Will it help them better?
Well, of course, Howrah is one of the big centers for Foundry, and I do not have any feedback from members in that part of the country, but we have a lot of feedback from members who are from Coimbatore area. Coimbatore is another center with a lot of small foundries, feed making things like pump parts and other automobile components by casting of metals. Now, I'm not sure what is the status of the Howrah industry. Have they now switched over totally from coal, etc., to availability of gas or availability of alternative fuels? And to what extent they're switched over to electrical uh, melting of the metals? So I think that is definitely something. And the other thing is the technology in upgradation. Now, the technology upgradation has its own pitfalls, which is like if you look at the Taj Triangle around Agra, and there were a lot of foundries in Agra, they all switched to gas because they were not allowed to use polluting coal anymore. And now, when there's no gas, they are in deep trouble. It's like the comment on Firozabad. So there is a pitfall there, but you have to balance that. Okay, at that time, it made sense to avoid coal. Does it make sense today to go back to coal? And then remember that if you go back to things like coal, you're causing pollution, which tomorrow we may face, or why tomorrow, even this year onwards, we'll face challenges from the US, from Europe, in their CBAM taxation rules. So there are a lot of things which need to be balanced, and maybe some of these things need to be relooked at. My own feeling, and since you have visited the Howrah area, you may be in a better position to tell me how many of the units you visited were 100% dependent on oil or gas, and what percentage did you feel were dependent on alternative fuels so they could continue despite of the shortage of fuel from the government or the oil companies and things like that? What is your feedback? I know in Coimbatore it's a very bad situation. They're mostly switched over to gas, and they're having a major problem there.
No, it's in parts actually. Not everyone has switched, and so, but that has its own, like you said, that has its
Yes.
pros and cons.
Of course,
But
it's not a
and the
desirable
supply
situation for
chain.
us to be suggesting to them to switch back to coal. This is not something which you
Right.
want to loudly say to anybody. But at the same time, if you've got to keep food on the table and you have to do that, there is a lot of pressure to consider that.
And like fabrication units, they are suffering for gas
Right.
shortage, welding. So many of these smaller parts are suffering.
Right. You see, like Ohuna said, I think she can speak more about Firozabad. I believe the situation there is very dire, both in Firozabad and also in the ceramic belt near it in uh, this Khurja.
Right, right. Ahuna, maybe we should send you again to Firozabad to find out what is happening right now. But do you have a question? Do you have a question for Mr. Sehgal?
Yeah. So we generally notice that when there are global energy shocks such as these, MSMEs are obviously impacted the fastest, and these manufacturing clusters across India are particularly vulnerable. So is there a case for maybe switching to alternative fuels like electric furnaces or any other policy changes that might help make these clusters less vulnerable to global crises?
So, Ohuna, the thing is that what you suggested are all good things, but they are all long-term things. There's nothing which can be done in the short term, and a few of them can be implemented, but certainly at least the midterm, if not the long term. Now, that is a strategic kind of decision which must be made, and the strategic decision then requires support for investment in doing that. All I would say that in our interaction with the Ministry of MSME, we find there is a lot of desire to understand and help the MSMEs, and particularly amongst the MSMEs, the micro and small do get a lot of attention. So any suggestion which is workable is looked at positively by them. Now, the problem which they outline, which is something we must all recognize, is that our role and the role of the central organizations is limited in terms of its outreach. The actions have to happen at the states. So the lot of the actions have to be things where the ministry can support us. There are political implications between the differences in political parties in power. And so somebody will take the suggestion, somebody will not. They will give more to some state where they're favorable, and somewhere perhaps they'll give less allocation. But I think the overall attempt is there to help MSMEs. And I would say that our own experience in interacting with the government is that if you have a positive suggestion, which has a good chance of making the situation better for the MSMEs, they definitely would support it. But then another constraint in there is that most of the things which we suggest are not directly under the control of the MSME ministry. They have to interact with their colleagues in other ministries, and they use that networking to help. So it becomes a little difficult, but at times they also tell us that you need to go and talk to XYZ ministry, you need to go and talk to XYZ state, and so on. But they help us fine tune the way we can project it. Like Mr. Jakar is saying, you project to the farmers in a certain way, and that would help get acceptance from the other side which is listening. So this sensitivity is certainly something which they guide us on. What are the bureaucratic limitations? What are the ways to overcome those bureaucratic limitations also? So to that extent, they're positive in whatever is within their power. They are recommending very strongly. And at our last meeting about 2 weeks ago, we were told that almost every morning there were meetings of the groups of ministers for about an hour and a half, discussing what was needed to be done and what could be done in a short time. And that was being reported back to the Prime Minister. As I said, they said every 2 days, at least, if not every morning, that kind of meeting is being held. So I don't know how far that will bring results, because due to confidentiality things, they're not specific on what they are supporting. We can be specific in what we're asking. They cannot be specific on the decisions being taken unless the decision is internal to themselves. They cannot commit on behalf of the government or another ministry. So
absolutely, this is also election time, and we'll go over to Shine, who is also tracking the elections. It's election season in Tamil Nadu, and Shine had visited the small-scale hub of Ambattur. Shine, do you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Saigal, I have a question. When you look at the entire value chain versus a normal industrial major and an MSME, one major issue that I noticed, that which most of the players in Ambattur told me, is that when we look at a raw material, for example, steel or aluminum, these major buyers look for bulk buying, so maybe 6 months or 1 year contract. While MSMEs, they look for short-lived time period of maybe probably 30 days or even 15 days. So the end result is, in the case of such sort of a huge price fluctuation happening, in the case of what is happening with steel or aluminum and shortage happening, the vendors who are in between, or the suppliers who are in between, tend to hold a lot and increase the prices during this time. So it more than, even if there is no supply shortage with regards to steel, by the time it reaches these players, it will be double or triple, or maybe sometimes for 30-40% of what a normal large scale industrial house is paying for a normal steel or aluminum. So that's one major issue with regards to pricing that I have seen. Is there any way out that the industry or the government can do in terms of making this uniform, whether it's for a long term buyer or for a short term buyer? I understand there is advantage, but the advantage should not be so varied. No, means one player is suffering, and those who are down the value
Right,
chain, they're having
right,
a
Mr.
loss.
Saigal, any answer?
I did not catch where you had visited. Could you say that? Tell me that again.
Ambattur. He had gone to
Ambattur in
Ambattur.
Chennai.
Okay, right. Okay, Ambattur, right. Okay. I just want to highlight a few things which you may or may not be aware of. A step which was taken a little before this war broke out in the Middle East was by EEPC, the Engineering Export Promotion Council. What they did was that they brought in they claimed to have brought in 6 of the largest steel makers in India, and talk to them, because what was found was that the price of steel in India was about 20% or so higher than the global prices. So they brought them in and pushed them to say that, look, as far as exporters are concerned, we will make sure we make steel available to them, which are at international price level. All right. Now, that was before the war broke out. Now, what we're trying to say is that, look, there's a great job you did. Now, let's do it for everybody domestically as well. So there is certain amount of pressurizing the steel company to be reasonable and make sure that prices are available. The other thing which I mentioned was this question, this aspect of trying to get particularly the MSMEs to write in their requirements to NSIC so that it could be aggregated, and NSIC, instead of going and saying, I want to buy 10 tons of steel, goes and says, I want to buy 1,000 tons of steel, has a different negotiating power and will get a different response, both in availability and price terms. And they can take their margin for meeting their operating costs. And incidentally, I would like to highlight that it's my understanding that NSIC for the last 20 years has been a profitable government undertaking, returning money to the exchequer and not depending on the government to fund their operations. So I hope they can do that with minimum marginal increase in cost. Another issue, particularly with steel, which came up from the MSMEs in the last 6 months or so, and has to some extent been resolved, is this thing which came about QCOs, quality control orders. Now, what happened with the quality control orders was that if you went and you talked to somebody that you got to get BIS certification before I can buy your steel, and my requirement is 10 tons or 100 tons, people say, sorry, we're not interested. Now, again, that is something which in the last 3-4 months and before the war breakout has been relaxed for many, many segments. But since it is specific to certain grades of steel which have been exempted, that is something which needs a wider application across different grades. Now, in this, what we're talking about as collective bargaining power, if you will, is that the quality control orders have been relaxed to a large degree in the last couple of months. There was an initiative about 6 months ago by Mr. Berry, who's the chairman of Niti Aayog, who was approached on this aspect, and he highlighted it that it's hurting perhaps more than it's helping. So it is being relooked at. But the other thing, on the other hand, the QCOs are helping to make sure that substandard steel is not being dumped into Indian markets. And that there are some positives in that, but MSMEs, of course, have been quite badly hit by this. Apart from what you found in Ambattur, we had similar representations on QCOs before the war broke out by the steel utensil industry from Jodhpur, which I believe is quite strong and a large segment of it is based there. So they had problems because they said that the quality control orders are being applied to us when we are buying a steel sheet and making things. So the person who's making the steel sheet may be subject to these quality control orders. We cannot start qualifying the steel and going to BIS and saying, this is a small lot of steel I bought, and please qualify this and give a BIS mark on it. So these kind of things have been eased off. But overall, the steel industry, dealing with scrap steel, dealing with the smaller MSMEs, particularly re-rolling and things like that, I believe some of the key ingredients, like somebody mentioned, manganese, comes from the Middle East, and that's causing problems. A lot of the scrap which is used for remelting comes from the Middle East, and shortage of that is causing problems. So there are problems there, and I don't think it'll go away quickly, but I don't think it is seen to have the same kind of magnitude as many other areas where the problems are there. That is the feeling we've got, and that's so we have not been pushing that too hard, frankly. But if there is data showing it needs to be pushed, that's our job to go and sensitize the government to that.
Right, right. Last question from Ajinkya before we go over to the audience. Ajinkya, one brief question.
Maybe a quick question was
Yeah.
on investments in innovation. A lot of MSMEs, especially for a lot of mechatronical components like gears, still rely on supply chains in Europe, for example. How can they ensure uh, adequate investments in their own small scale enterprises to ensure that they can tide over some of these supply chain issues that they may face because of global issues.
Okay. My feeling on that is that the orders are there from Europe. I don't seem to have heard that the orders have gone down significantly. The problem has been that the shipping times have tremendously increased, and at the same time, somehow over the last 1 year, the European buyers, I understand, have switched from payment terms being FOB India to CIF Europe. And that automatically has stretched the working capital requirements of MSMEs considerably because the shipping times used to be under a month, typically 3 to 4 weeks, is now more like 6 to 8 weeks or closer to 8 weeks on average. And now on top of that comes this double whammy of ships not being available, shipping space not being available, and that container stuck in the Middle East. Another problem, which I don't know if you came across, is that many people who had shipped material, the ship went to the Middle East and it got stuck there. The container is stuck there. Now what do? You shipped, the material is not reached your buyer. He doesn't start counting the days when he's got to pay you. So then he may even cancel the order. So we had highlighted this problem, and the Honorable Commerce Minister assured us, and I think he has already, they've implemented a lot of these things, is to make it easy to bring back material which you once exported back to India without too many complicated compliances and paperwork, because your order got cancelled or person didn't want it. So this works fine with metal, but what about people who are exporting foodstuffs? So there are challenges there, but I think and there is a fair amount of food export from India to the Middle East, but there is this other challenge of materials is stuck in other ports, and you exported it, you filed your declarations with the RBI and your bank and customs, and I think a lot of simplification, at least the procedures, has been implemented or announced at least by the government. I'm not sure what the ground implementation is, where it is much simpler for people to bring it back into the country without getting into very complicated explanations. So to that extent, yes. But I think European demand seems to be not coming down too much. So I don't think that is an area of vulnerability so much.
Okay, we are running out of time, but we'll take audience question. There are lots, but we'll just pick and choose. One is from Mr. Sai. He's asking, and this is for both of you, Mr. Jakar and Mr. Sehgal. In this crisis period, has the time come to focus fully on green energy sources and biofertilizers to avoid dependence on crude oil? Mr. Jakar.
I think you're muted, Mr. Jakar. Mr. Jakar, you're muted, sir.
Okay, thank you, Ashokji. So I think this whole focus on biofuels is misplaced because we are using crops to make fuel. And I don't want to be termed as an anti-national and say that this is the wrong policy. This is how this times are. But in the sense that one of the goals of the government was diversification of agriculture to high value crops. By focusing on biofuels, we are forcing people now we not forcing, we are incentivizing people to grow maize and such crops, and we are reducing our area under pulses and oil seeds and other crops. So I think so we need a systems approach. The government is incapable of a systems approach. They're incapable. They do not even, like Ashokji was saying, they met every week or every day. They never meet farmers. They only meet farmers they like, and they don't take public opinion. So they are very distant from the ground realities. As far as doing natural farming, converting to natural farming where you reduce your usage of chemicals or you do away with completely, I think it's a long story of 20-30 years. It requires a 20 to 30 year vision and plan to do something like that. I don't think so the government has the capacity to make those changes. It does not have even people to make those changes. So I mean, it's something that I'm not very confident about. But I mean, I'll just take a moment and say that regarding this present situation of fertilizers, we've been reading very very good economists who I admire, like Ashok Gulati and Ramesh Chand, giving solutions about how to go about it. I think the solutions that economists like Ramesh Chandji and Ashok Gulati are giving are not practically possible. And nutrient-based subsidy, it's an idea that's been there for the last 30 years, but there's been no progress on it. Then the others who are saying that the government should stop subsidizing fertilizers. That's what the industry wants, and the government can directly transfer all the funds to farmers. Even that has its problems. The government does not have the political will to transfer this. So there are ways it can be done, but the government is very distant from how it could be done. And there are no quick solutions to this.
There are
I
no
don't know
quick
if there is time.
solutions.
I could have talked about what solutions are possible, but at the moment, I think so. The only best solution that India has is to pray that monsoons are on time, and that's what matters. It's not fertilizers.
Right. Monsoons will matter more than fertilizer. Mr. Sehgal, what do you have to say?
I think there is a cross fertilization of the idea which Mr. Jakar has mentioned, which is that you see, we in India, and not, I don't know so much about the farm sector, but definitely in industry, try to do business on the lowest cost level. And I suspect that a lot of farmers also do that because of some experience I've got in the local area. Whereas what is required is for all of us to realize that there is perhaps a better balance. If you upgrade the quality, even if the quantity gets reduced, the overall earning from it would still be beneficial. And that would require less resources, such as fertilizer and so on. But make sure that you're going in more for higher value crops, going in for better quality crops, and perhaps you're harvesting it at the more appropriate time. Just to mention a specific incident, Mr. Jaka, that happened a month ago, that I'd gone somewhere where there was a small kitchen garden with excellent butter growing there. And so we had that, and when we were coming back to Delhi, we thought we'd buy some more. And that was terrible. And the farmers said that it's because, you see, we wait for it to become heavy, by which time it's lost its flavor and quality. So they may gain more on the number of kilos they're selling, but the price which people are willing to pay for a better quality, they're not capitalizing on that. So this applies to industry also. If you make better quality things, we'll sell it to Europe and they will pay more for it rather than us going for quality, quantity, which then you hear about Tirupur and you hear about quantity. And the marketing companies make a lot of money on the quality aspect, which because of the marketing brand. So this is something I think we have to realize ourselves in the country, that go for quality, pay the price for it, and it'll benefit both domestically and internationally with less resources required, which is, I think, the point which I got from what Ms. Jakar was saying.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. We've run out of time completely. There are so many takeaways from this webinar, Business Standard Dialogue, the first in the series that we had today, and we'll regularly meet over several topics of importance related to business, economy, geopolitics, and so on. Thanks. And on agriculture side, I think the message that is coming out is that, it is monsoon. That is like we really have to look forward to a good monsoon. The forecast is not so good, but fertilizer shortage right now, it's not a crisis. What we've heard from Mr. Sehgal is that, the impact of the war, even if the war was to end tomorrow or day after tomorrow, the impact we'll see the impact for some time to come, maybe weeks, months, maybe more. And hopefully the government will act on the presentation and the demands that you've made from the industry side. So thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. And see you soon with the next episode of Business Standard Dialogue on another interesting subject. Stay tuned and take care.